Hello, everybody. Welcome to another live episode of the Strange Oddities podcast. I'm your host, Matthew J. Haas. Welcome, everybody. Guys, we're live. If you haven't subscribed, please subscribe to our show on YouTube. Just look for Strange Oddities podcast and just hit the bell icon on the top right corner of the page. Guys, prepare yourselves to explore the horizons of your mind. And this is entertainment and beyond. That's right. You heard it right here. This is entertainment and beyond. So all things strange and entertainment right at your window, at your doorstep, right here on Strange Oddities podcast. Guys, as always, get the boring stuff out of the way. If we can't exactly hear ourselves live during the show, so if there's anything terrible going on, please let me know. Private message me. There's a chat. Throw it in the chat. If you have questions, feel free to ask the guest or myself questions. I have an awesome guest tonight. I'm excited to introduce to you guys. We've had this in the making for like over a month, but it's exciting. It's a freaking awesome topic. I love time travel. There's a lot of time travel movies out there, all different kinds of great movies from like Time Cop and even Star Trek dabbled in time travel. There was so many great movies about time travel. Of course, Back to the Future with Michael J. Fox and Christopher Lloyd. Everybody remembers Back to the Future. But this is the real deal. This is like a government experiment. And if you guys haven't seen the movie, The Philadelphia Experiment, I suggest you go watch that movie because that really, it's loosely based on the experiment and the conspiracy theory, but it's pretty close. I'm not sure where they got their info from, but it's relatively close. But it was a great movie. I like it. And I have this awesome gentleman. I recommend you get his book to really understand the Montauk Project and the experiment in time travel by Preston B. Nichols and Mr. Peter Moon, with author Peter Moon with us here tonight. I'm going to go ahead and put him in here with us. Peter, thanks for doing the show. You're live with me now, and thanks for doing the show tonight. I really appreciate it.
Okay, it's nice to be here.
Yeah, absolutely. I want to prepare our viewers and listeners to fall down a very long, dark rabbit hole because this particular topic and story surrounding Montauk Project and the Philadelphia Experiment, mind control, time travel, also inspired the hit TV series Netflix Stranger Things, based on true events, accounts of mind control and stuff like that. Peter, where did you begin in all this? I know you knew Preston B. Nichols and you wrote those books together, and the work you guys that you have in these books, which I've read, are just amazing. I think the information you provide here is great.
Well, it begins for me. It begins with meeting Preston Nichols in November 7th, 1990.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, he was, I went to meet him because he was a prolific inventor who needed help with marketing his wares. I knew nothing about the Philadelphia. I'd heard of the Philadelphia Experiment. I thought it was a ridiculous idea. And then when I went to meet Preston, he was giving a lecture on Earth changes with a panel of other people from the Long Island chapter of the United States Psychotronics Association, which used to meet in Farmingdale,
right,
Long Island at that point. And he was, he says, you can talk with me, but you're going to have to wait till the break because I'm giving a lecture tonight. So I sat and listened to that lecture, and boy, they were talking about Earth changes. And so much of the subject was about the Philadelphia Experiment and the Montauk Project, which there was also participants in the room that night. Duncan Cameron, who was a participant in the Montauk Project and the Philadelphia Experiment, and his half-brother or brother, I don't know how you categorized the relationship, Al Bielek, who was sitting in the audience next to me at that night. It was a small audience of no more than 20 people. But that's how I got introduced to this. And of course, the Philadelphia Experiment was a experiment where the Navy was experimenting with trying to make ships invisible to radar.
Correct.
1943.
Yep.
There was, by reports of multiple sources, there was an actual newsreel documentary of the Philadelphia experiment that was shown in a movie theater when the Philadelphia experiment movie came out in 1984, I think. And it came out and then it was recalled right away, shut down as the story goes. I talked to a woman who actually saw the release, the premiere of that movie in Philadelphia, and she saw the newsreel. I talked to another man who actually saw it. It tapped into a TV broadcast he was watching of Victory at Sea. That was paranormal. And of course, there was another man who had said that who had brought the film to Preston. It was actually stolen government property, at which point Preston turned it back into the government.
Right.
That story came from Al Bielek. And then when I asked Preston why he did that, he says, well, because it was government property. I had to turn it back in.
Right.
That had angered Al Bielek at Preston because Al didn't get to see it or show it as proof. But anyway, so that was the making a ship appear invisible to radar in 1943.
Right.
And according to the story, which is a very, I guess, far-fetched story from a normal perspective, a normal human perspective, Al Bielek, who was then Edward Cameron, and his brother Duncan jumped off the ship. They were shielded from the radar, which was generating rotating magnetic fields around the ship, which caused it to move out of time. And they jumped off the ship. They were protected from the radar because they were in a shielded room. And then when they came out, they jumped off the ship and landed at Montauk. And that sort of begins the saga. But that didn't get figured out till the 1980s, when there's a whole lot of strange stuff that occurred. But in the Montauk Project started out of the Philadelphia experiment, which was when people were subjected to electromagnetic fields of strong frequency, they began to lose their minds.
Right.
And more specifically, the part of their mind that is referenced to time, the ordinary stream of time. And this resulted in mental discombobulation. It also resulted in some cases in physical discombobulation, where the people were merged or amalgamated into the bulkhead of the ship itself. And furthermore, sometimes spontaneous combustion. So the survivors of the experiment were brought to Camp Upton, which Camp Upton, which was a World War I convalescent hospital. It was also a training ground at Yaphank, Long Island.
Right.
And Yaphank had also been the site of where the Bund used to meet. Nazis, the biggest conglomeration of Nazis outside of Germany in 1930s was on Long Island.
Wow.
And they brought them to this area, which was also Camp Upton, or right near Camp Upton. And this later became Brookhaven National Laboratories. They took these sailors, they studied their mental trauma, and they began to research the human mind, combining it with the captured German documents and the captured German scientists, or the paperclip scientists, not necessarily the paperclip scientists you've heard about from who started the rocket program, but the other ones, and who were more involved with human mind, the human mind. And basically they started to empirically study the human mind as it compared to radio waves, so that they could link up the human mind and affect it with radio waves, which is radar. And anybody who's worked extensively in radar will know that when you change the radar frequency emissions at a radar station, it will change the mood of the people working there. So they realized they could change people's minds. And as this research was eventually taken out to Montauk, because they had a huge radar dish out there, which is still there to this day. It's falling down slowly but surely.
Falling apart now.
It operated at approximately 435 megahertz, which was the window frequency to the human consciousness. So they could, out of the gain horn of that radar station, they could affect people for up to 100 miles, if not more, and affect their moods. Animals would act strange, and people would act strange. And that began the investigation of Preston Nichols, because he found that he was involved in this project. That was a long series of events and circumstances in his own life. And that's what the Montauk Project, Experiments in Time, the book I wrote with him, is about. It's about him not only discovering his own role in the experiment, but discovering the historical circumstances under which it occurred.
Right. And I just want to add to this real quick, if you don't mind, Peter. Anybody who wants to visit where Montauk Project took place, you actually can visit, because they turned it into a state park. It's owned by the state now. The government, what do you call it? The bunkers still exist. They're still standing there. There's only a few of them there. And the radar is still there, but it's in disarray. It's falling apart. They have a fence around it. You can't really walk right up to the radar because of the fence. It's protected by government property, and they have signs up and everything. But it's a state park, so anybody's more than welcome to go there. It's called Camp Hero now, and that's pretty much where all these stories kind of took place and where they originated from.
Well, exactly. And the whole reason it's a state park, or recognized as a state park, it was always called a state park, but they would never let you on it, except for small areas. And that was there was a whole court case over it, because Preston Nichols and Duncan Cameron were ticketed for being on the property, and they fought the case in court. This was a East Hampton Town Court, and they won the case. And the judge basically made an issue out of it, because he says, look, I walk my dog out there. I could be violating the law. So over time, the New York State Parks Commissioner, Bernadette Castro, ordered the Montauk tour tape, which was a VHS tape we used to sell, and she ordered it, and she saw what was going on, and she ordered a cleanup with super funds, and they allegedly cleaned up the toxicity, which I don't think they cleaned it all up by any means, but they cleaned up, and I believe that there was atomic waste on the base. It was from Bikini Atoll that they took, and we chased a dump truck one time. It was trying to escape us. We did, and then I assume that dump truck went to the Brookhaven Town dump, which was later the issue of a court case, which the Suffolk County top Republican, John Powell, was accepting bribes to allow dumping in there, which included dumping from Camp Hero. He was later put in prison and eventually died. So there have been a lot of adventures over the years, investigations, and Camp Hero, you can now go onto it and pretty much look over the whole thing, except for where the transmitter tower is, and it's dangerous to go there because the building is slowly falling down.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, I wish they would somewhat restore it, but just from historical significance, because it was one of the biggest radars that were built on Long Island, and it has Navy significance, and aside from the conspiracy and the theories behind Camp Hero, but it has some historical significance of Long Island and during World War II, because they were afraid of German submarines coming to the island, and they were also using it to watch out for any incomings coming our way, and all that good stuff. But
the dish didn't get actually built till after World War II. And it had a very short lifespan in terms of its usefulness, but it found a new use in about the late 1950s and early 1960s, because over the horizon radar made this antiquated, but what it did do was it was useful for human experiments. There were 12 of these similar installations. They called it SAGE radar, and it was around the country. They had different radar sites like that to intercept missiles, see what was in the day or night sky.
Right.
And so it was and it's of course a great being at the eastern end of Long Island. It's a great place for reconnaissance and seeing what's out there, whether it be ships or aircraft. And the Germans were known to have their U-boats off the coast.
Right. Yeah, I've heard rumors of ships being really close to Long Island just around the World War II period, not during, but like right after. And there's some rumors to, possible close action. I remember articles like that, reading stuff like that. But, if you remember, not that long ago, maybe like 10 years ago now, we had the Montauk Monster wash up on shore. And even like there was speculation that could have came from Camp Hero, because God knows, like you said, with all the waste that was left behind, what it could have affected environmentally around the area and the animals there. Then you also have Plum Island, which is not that far. There was speculation that it came from there. I think these facilities are like a spawn of, like you said, they were still connected to all these origins of this experiment. I think the Montauk Monster was part of that.
Well, I can tell you the Montauk Monster appeared on the beach at Montauk in July of 2008.
Okay.
The first time I went to Romania, and I was, when I went on to the internet, I was getting notifications of the Montauk Monster, and it was it's debatable what it was.
Yeah.
One of my friends knew the person who basically it was in her, I guess, who went and got it and took it away. Somebody took it away and it disappeared. They took pictures of it. But what was most interesting with regards to the Montauk Monster for me is I had the opportunity to visit Plum Island. Plum Island is a highly secure area where they do biological studies. Now, the rumors of what goes on there are much greater than the actual story you will hear. But I was there with the Rotary Club because a friend of mine, my personal doctor, Magdalena Goparmisa, she was Filipino. She was part of the Rotary Club, and she says, "I want to take you to Plum Island." So we had to get approved and whatnot, and we actually missed the boat from Orient Point, and they sent a boat back for us because we missed it with the rest of the group, and we got to go, and you were allowed to bring a lunch, but you could not take anything back. Whatever you didn't eat for your lunch, you threw away because of the biological risk of being there. They brought us into a very nice lecture room, and they talked to us about Plum Island, the history of Plum Island, and then we would meet the director of the camp. And he spent a great deal of time talking about the Montauk Monster because this was the public outreach they were supposed to do. And basically, he spent a long time talking about the Montauk Monster, saying that they didn't do anything funny there. And then he mentioned, then they took us on a bus tour around the island, not the whole island. They said there's certain places you can't go. And then he said there's certain places he couldn't go. He had to get security clearance for about a year before they would let him go there. And he slipped, his mouth slipped, and he said, "Top security." I said, "Oh no." And so it was a very funny experience, but he spent a lot of time disowning the Montauk Monster.
Wow, that's funny. Yeah. Was this time period when you visited Plum Island before Homeland Security, or was Homeland Security already there?
Well, It's I think it was it was Homeland Security. In fact, I was there the week after Jesse Ventura was there with his conspiracy show, and he was saying how Jesse Ventura was trying to take a boat and approach the island, and he was
I remember that.
being
Yeah.
guarded, and he's sitting there at the desk and pounding his fist. All he had to do was ask permission to go on the island. But you had to do it through, say through the Rotary Club. I mean, so he was making a big deal about how secret it is, and it is. But he could have got on the island if he would have just been a little polite and proper about it.
Yeah, he's a little rough around the edges.
Yeah, but it made for a show. And to tell you the truth, it is a highly secretive place. They say all they do out there is researching hoof and mouth disease. And he even said that there's a new budget of $360 million going into this new building out there. At the same time, they were saying they were going to transfer the whole installation to Kansas. Wow. And they've been saying that ever since. And so far, it hasn't moved to Kansas. By the way, that island is the most beautiful location I've ever seen. It is just gorgeous out there. You wouldn't want to live there because of all the biological stuff that's been put out there, but it is. You
might grow an extra finger or a third eye somewhere in your shoulder.
Perhaps, but it's just very beautiful.
Yeah, no, absolutely. The habitats around there are great. Yeah, sea lions come out there that way. The birds, it's very green. The island, if I remember correctly, because I took a lighthouse tour, and they kind of take you near it, but they can't get too close because, again, you need permission, and because of Homeland Security, they only let you come so many feet in front of there. So, but during the lighthouse tour, we had sea lions come up, swimming around, and the water there is beautiful too. It's not like the yucky green water you see in Manhattan. The water is beautiful there.
Indeed, it is.
Yeah, absolutely. So, what I'd like to do is maybe we can go back in time a little bit. Speaking of time travel, I remember there being, I don't know the facts behind this, if this is factual or if this is just rumor, but I remember speaking with friends about this because we were doing our own research into those who had their hands on the machinery and the equipment that they designed for this ship to disappear. If I'm not mistaken, was Tesla or Albert Einstein, some of those guys have their hands on it as far as the equipment?
Well, the historical what's left of the story is that Einstein has been seen in photographs at the Philadelphia Naval Yard or with naval. Maybe he was at Princeton, Princeton is not too far, an hour away from Philadelphia. But he was seen with scientists. He was known to be at the location, Navy scientists. Tesla, who died in January of 1943, was involved in the research of the Philadelphia experiment, but saw the damage it could do to human beings and backed off of it. At which point it was taken over by John von Neumann, the computer scientist.
Yeah. And if I'm not mistaken, also, I don't know if I read this in the books, but there were, I don't know if it was Preston B. Nichols or somebody else, as I could have my information mixed up because it's again, there's this big rabbit hole and there's so many eyewitnesses and people that were involved, key players that were involved. And I remember reading somewhere where they tried to recreate the same experiment. They tried to piece together the same technology, and I don't know if they were successful or who was involved in that.
I don't know what you're referring to.
Yeah. Okay.
I don't know what you're referring to. I mean, people trying to replicate the Philadelphia experiment or the Montauk Project.
Right.
Any experiment in time is going to connect potentially, not necessarily, but potentially to any other experiment in time.
Yeah. With your background, and because you have such a great background aside from all this, but Do you believe time travel is possible?
I know it is possible.
Okay.
I know it is possible. And in fact, I have a website called the Time Travel Education Center.com, which
Right.
people can go to and they can see 7 free videos which demonstrate with 8th grade math and physics that time travel does not violate the laws of math or physics. And I was taught this by a scientist, Dr. David Anderson, who actually has a time reactor and a patent for a time reactor that can actually slow down or speed up time.
Wow.
And that's a whole nother aspect. In fact, I did a revised version of the Montauk Project. It's available from skybooks.usa.com. It's called the Silver Anniversary Edition of the Montauk Project. And that book has yes. That book has basically a lot of additions. It has the original book. I put italics notes adding to it, talking about things that I could not talk about at the time the book was published. And I also give a description of the investigation, the field investigation and the occult investigation, which accompanied, which was done, the journalistic investigation was done with Preston Nichols. We extensively investigated and we corroborated everything in the book very clearly, except for the time travel. And the time travel aspect was corroborated and proven by Dr. David Anderson, who had now done advanced research, not necessarily in alignment, or not necessarily as a result of the Montauk Project, but he was a scientist from the Air Force who discovered the secrets of time. And
Right.
of course, I've had a relationship with him now for 23 years, but he's very mysterious, and he's not in my beck and call, but he does now and then appear in my life, and
Nice.
so that definitely he came forward not only with the science but with the technology.
Nice.
It's of course it's all, you have to have access to it, which
Yeah.
is the big hurdle.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't know if you've read this book, but another book I do recommend to our viewers and listeners. If you really want to learn about more of the Philadelphia experiment itself, it was called. The book I have is actually the original because it was printed in. Oh God, I don't think it has the date on here, does it?
It's the
Looking.
Philadelphia experiment and other UFO conspiracies.
No. Project Invisibility.
That's by Charles Berlitz and
Yes.
William Moore.
Yeah, Charles Berlitz and by William L. Moore.
Yeah.
It's basically they get into like the witness and the testimonials from like supposed witnesses. There wasn't too many.
Carlos Allende, or Carl
Yeah.
Allen, it was called. He was involved in that book, and
Yes.
he was a witness to the Philadelphia experiment, and he
Right.
he knew too much for a common sailor or whatever he was. He had suffered a lot of disturbance as well,
Right.
and he wrote letters to Morris K. Jessup,
Hmm.
an investigator who wrote the book The Case for the UFO. And that book, he sent in notes with it. The Navy had it reprinted, and so Morris Jessup became the first, I guess what you'd say, investigator of the Philadelphia experiment, and he lost his life under mysterious circumstances. It was an alleged suicide, but it did not appear to be a murder.
Yeah.
To be.
Yeah, it could have been because these guys knew a lot of stuff about it, and so my thing is with this is Peter, did the Navy did they know that this could possibly like time travel with their experiment, or did they accidentally stumble upon it and then realize what happened afterwards?
Well, Preston Nichols said that when you do a project like this, or where there's a big government operation,
Yeah.
quote unquote conspiracy, whether it be 9/11 or whether it be the JFK assassination or whether it be say the Philadelphia experiment, he says it's very multi-leveled and multi-tiered. So
Right.
certain people are just doing mundane things, and certain people are doing things that are very secret, and there's a certain amount of knowledge of what's going on. But I think the bottom line with the Philadelphia experiment is that it created such a ripple in the space-time continuum and such a trauma, and that they didn't know what had happened. In other words, it got out of control.
Yeah.
And they had all these traumatized sailors, and they had to figure out what's going on. And even to this day, say at Area 51 and whatnot, where they have brain scanners where you go in that compromises your short-term memory, so you don't even remember what you worked on.
Right.
And those are, of course, more sophisticated operations than what they did back then. But it was a whole huge problem with lots of secrecy around it and lots of drama and trauma.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, but like I guess in the movie it was kind of accurate, like when the guys were melted into the ship, and they were like, half of their body was like infused into the deck, and their legs were on somewhere else, and it was pretty gruesome.
Well, yeah, a lady once came to a lecture, and she was a doctor, a naturopath, and she had studied at Hofstra University, and they were her professor. They actually were studying the data from the Philadelphia experiment.
Nice.
It was like being studied at Hofstra University on Long Island. And
cool.
She said, and she wanted me to know that they actually were studying the case data of these sailors who were compromised. So, if that was done so long ago,
yeah,
but there has been anecdotal information over the years, and there's too many stories to corroborate it, to dismiss it. And of course, now we know that time travel is possible. But even today, in a world where time travel is possible, but closely guarded, it's the information is largely ignored. And frankly, it's not for the average common person. The average common person has been too busy in the last couple of years struggling with issues surrounding COVID and now the drama and trauma with Russia and the Ukraine. So people are just very distracted trying to survive and live.
Wow. So with that said, there are other rumors surrounding Montauk Project and Camp Hero. There's inspired events that inspired the hit show on Netflix, Stranger Things. I don't know if you've watched any of that, but a lot of people love that show. I don't know how fictitious it is versus what
it's complete and utter fiction. In fact, they tried to boldly call it Montauk, and they were going to base it on Montauk. And I've even seen the original pitches that they did, which I didn't see at the time. I didn't find out that till years later, after the statute of limitations had expired. But at the time they were promoting it, I did send them a certified letter warning them of possible copyright infringement, and they changed the name from Montauk to Stranger Things. They changed the location from Montauk, and basically they haven't addressed the story at all. They've just made up their own story. So, but yeah, it's gotten press of being based upon, but it's really not based upon. It's based upon a general idea, and it's just made up stories.
Yeah. Okay. Oh, cool. The other rumors that I'd like to address, which I'm sure you've heard of, are the extraterrestrial and UFO rumors from Camp Hero and the Montauk Project, that there was an alleged captivity of supposed alien captive there, and they tried experimenting with the mind control thing that they were doing there with that. And I've heard from other local psychic medium locals that have visited there a few times, and she picked up on a lot of that type of energy there, and she gave so much information about that, and I was like blown away that could be a possibility. What are your thoughts on those rumors?
Well, as Preston Nichols would say, he says there are very few alien abductions, what he would call alien abductions. Most of them were government abductions. And they had, and of course, when Preston recounts his own involvement with aliens, you have to wonder how much of that is superimposed screen memories.
Right.
The alien scenario has been very suspect. Most of the alien stuff are people under trauma and are being that's a whole government op in itself, because the government has gone to so much to feed this alien myth. For example, Ancient Aliens on the History Channel is the most popular show in the history of cable television. And they're just feeding all of this. And of course, there's no aliens. No aliens are ever going to appear. It's all about government. Why would they let that show just get all of this slack and mileage, and then ignore stories like my work or other work that I've been produced? In other words, they want nothing to do with the story, which will expose so much of that. Meanwhile, people believe in aliens, and it's very popular, and it makes people happy to believe in aliens. Meanwhile, there is no disclosure of any kind. Just that they were going to do this big disclosure last summer, and of course, nothing ever happens. And when I did publish a book that disclosed real information, they stopped talking about it. That's what happens, but this is to be expected.
Right. Yeah. And well, they're happy about it because it's blowing smoke and mirrors. It's kind of like keeping people happy, and they think that these things are going on, and yet it's keeping them away from the real truth of what the government.
Makes you think you're informed. It makes you think you're informed, and of course, this happens all the time with the media. It's constantly distracting people to the point you think you're being informed of what's actually going on.
Yeah, exactly. So it's almost like they're brainwashing people in a way. And
well, this was the Office of War Information, and this is about it in the new book I published, The Roswell Deception, where the Office of War Information was controlling all information that came into and out of the press. And this was done by order of Franklin Roosevelt about World War II. So, it's like they're controlling all of the information. And then the Office of War Information was later, turned in the National Security Agency, the CIA, and it out, it was chopped up and became other things, but still that press control, the media is basically, all the reporters are embedded into report only the news that's fit to print.
Yeah. Do you ever watch the show Project Blue Book?
Never heard of it.
Oh, you never heard of it? They History Channel came out with a mini series. It didn't last, unfortunately. I think it only had 2 seasons or a season and a half or something like that. They got canceled because the network didn't want to. They don't want to get into scripted I guess entertainment for the History Channel. They want more non-scripted, more like docu-series kind of stuff, I think. But anyway, Project Blue Book was great because it's kind of like what we talk about. It's it was the government's way of, all right, go out there and investigate, but like persuade the people to think one thing when it's really not, when it's not that. And they had these two, a scientist from the school. He was a teacher, with a science background. Then they had the government guy to make sure he was following his steps, correctly with the way the government wanted him to investigate, and to keep him in check, I guess, so to speak, even though he was a believer. And it was a great show. I loved it. The Project Blue Book was on the History Channel. It was a great show. They cancel all the good ones.
I'm not familiar with it.
Oh, okay. I recommend it. So if you ever have any downtime, I would binge watch the first 2 seasons. It's a great show. But yeah. So for those who are joining us late, in the show, guys, we're talking with author Peter Moon. He wrote a book called Montauk Project: Experiments in Time. I have the silver anniversary edition. It was written with Preston B. Nichols, and we're talking about time travel, the possibility of time travel, the experiments that were done at Montauk Project, Camp Hero, the mind control, stuff like that. The movie Philadelphia Experiment, the Philadelphia Experiment, which actually took place on a ship in 1943. It was called the SS Eldridge. So now the other thing I want to bring up, Peter, is there was another witness apparently in I think Norfolk, Virginia, if I'm correct, that spotted it somewhere else
There
where
were
it,
several witnesses who saw it off the coast of the USS Eldridge off
right.
the coast of Norfolk, Virginia.
Yeah.
And there were some people who saw it off the coast of Montauk, or perhaps even in the Bermuda Triangle off Bermuda.
Oh,
I
wow.
don't know. These are anecdotal stories, but basically the ship had disappeared and it was displaced in space and time. And
Right.
there were many reports of that.
Yeah. Did they happen to figure out what time period that it actually dipped into at all, or?
I don't know that it severely went out of time, just
Right.
that it
Okay.
went from was displaced in space.
Okay.
I mean, I don't really,
Yeah.
just the fact that it appeared and disappeared was fantastic enough.
Sure. So, well, I mean, in a way, their original experiment and idea to make a whole ship invisible was successful in a way. I mean, even
It
though
was definitely successful, and there's a reason for that scientifically. Is when time slows down or speeds up, it will move out of this reference frame.
yeah,
It will actually move, and that those are explained in the videos that I've done, the Time Travel Education Center. You'll see how the Philadelphia experiment could have occurred, how something does appear invisible, because it's actually in a self-contained field, and it begins to rotate slower or faster. And
wow.
when it goes faster, it goes back in time. When it goes slower, it goes forward into time. The slower it goes, the farther into the future. The faster it goes, the further back it goes into time. So
Wow.
this is how you could theoretically rig a clock device, like is in the H.G. Wells story, The Time Machine. You
Yeah.
could theoretically have a counter
Right.
if it was calibrated to the speed
Mhm.
of how slow, how fast. But that's getting pretty technical. But
Yeah.
that's why it would. That's why invisibility would occur.
Right.
There's also other ways to promote invisibility. With Preston Nichols used to say, with the stealth technology, there was 3 levels of invisibility. The lowest, crudest one was the radar, was the paint that would deflect radar. That was the low, and that's all the government would own up to. Preston
Right.
was deeply involved in stealth technology, and he could never talk about it because it was, state secrets.
Yeah.
And
Sure.
he wouldn't talk about it.
Yeah.
Even when he could talk about it, he was so deeply programmed on that subject.
Right. Right. Yeah. No, totally. I can understand why too. You fear for your life because you don't know what the government's capable of. Again, making you disappear and look like a suicide or an accident, and then you're gone. So
Exactly.
yeah, absolutely. So, I'm glad you brought up H.G. Wells and the Time Machine. That was one of my most favorite movies of all time. That was a brilliant movie. I thought the concept of that was great. And another one I thought was really great, even though it was more of a romance movie than anything. But another methodology of time was Somewhere in Time with Christopher Reeves, which I thought was interesting because there's been a couple of movies like that, like The Butterfly Effect, where they could like utilize their brain in a way, I guess, or like tap into something in their head, and then they would imagine themselves like in a different time period, and that was an interesting concept.
David Anderson says there's about 2% of the population who have the adeptship to be able to affect time.
Right.
And that would be through the psychic sensitivities.
Yeah.
That, in my opinion, that can also lead to problems for the individuals involved, because they're
The mental state.
penetrating areas that perhaps others don't want you to penetrate. And this becomes the whole challenge of time travel and pretty much anything of a powerful or esoteric nature. It's like, what would it take to get into the secret meetings of the NSA, the CIA? This is, when you get to time travel, there is certain censorship built in around it. Some of it is mundane government or industrial security. And of course, anybody who studies stories about government security, there are certain security elements in private industry that are not backed by any known source. There's a certain where quote unquote men in black type people show up. And I'm not talking about men in black that are ghosts, but people that you don't really know where the hell they come from. And they will show up out of the blue, so to speak. So you're dealing with censorship issues. And this also bridges into occult consciousness and or spiritual consciousness. And so in this world, what I found is you're basically allowed to go where you're meant to go. And if you have a valid reason for being there, you can enter. When you begin to, start, sneaking into buildings where you're violating laws, this can get very touchy. Very touchy and make one very vulnerable. And it's not necessarily a safe way to go. But there are certain areas that you can go to, penetrate, and discover if you're indeed meant to do that. And I've had some rare opportunities to be exposed to certain things. Of course, how far this will go. David Anderson has said I will, should get to see his lab someday. That would be very interesting. And even then, what he says is when you see his lab, when people see it, the time reactor field begins to be generated, and there's all these colors. It comes alive, and you can see things slow down or speed up. You can see something like a baseball falling very slow because it's slowed down. So the rate of the baseball falling down would happen very slow. So it looks like it's floating down in the air. It's I guess shocking to the sensibilities. It can induce what he says is a spiritual experience or a revelation experience, or it can be met with extreme shock and discombobulation, or some people just kind of blasé about it. And it's basically shaking your ontological paradigm. It's like okay, all of a sudden reality as I knew it is suspended. And what the hell, and where this becomes very important is, why are you there? And what are you there for? Are you there to see it as if it's a science exhibit at the World's Fair or Expo Center at Disneyland or something? Is it a scientific exhibit that you're there for and to notice and see and maybe report on? Or is there something of a deeper nature that you are to do or become involved in? In the case of David Anderson, he says that you do not want to put things back. You don't want to change time, because once you've changed time, you've created a ripple effect that you can't control. At the same time, he says people are monkeying with time. So it becomes Preston Nichols used to say he was told that World War II was a war in time. So what is going on there that the average person doesn't know? And of course, so if I was to be so quote unquote lucky as to access this, what would be the purpose? It seems that my purpose is to penetrate the secrets of time. And then the more you go into it, it becomes more of a spiritual paradigm, and relates to ancient doctrines like the Tibetan idea of the Kala chakra, the wheel of time.
Wow.
And of course, the beginning is the end, which also has a Christian theme. I am Alpha and I am Omega. And so you see the beginning is the end is the beginning. UFOs have the quintessential behavior pattern that is consistent with a time reactor. So it's much more likely that UFOs that are not generated from this plane of existence are generated from the future or the past, and are making their appearance here. Those that are not, as they say, created in this dimension.
Right. Yeah, I've heard that theory. That's really interesting. I would also think that what I want to stress is that it's also a huge responsibility, because, like you said, you don't want to go back and then cause a ripple effect, and then not only are you causing a problem for you yourself in a mental state, but you could be causing some serious issues, to other things, and when you come back, like you're gonna mess with the current, and like it could really mess things up.
Well, yes, and what the most curious thing that David has said, he says, you even to look at the timeline is to change it, just to observe it, and he warns and cautions against this. At the same time, what on earth is he doing with a time reactor if he doesn't use it? What's it for?
Yeah.
So one of the things he has built is a temporal tremor detector, which is basically a series of satellites around the Earth, which can monitor anytime somebody is monkeying with time. It's like you can call it a quake in time. It's not an earthquake, but it's like you can see it when time is being changed through the differential in I'm trying to think what it's called. I just don't remember the name. It's got a frame dragging, the frame dragging of the planet.
Right.
So he can detect it's like he can conceivably go to the experimenters of the government in Japan, China, or India and knock on their door metaphorically and say, I understand you're experimenting with time. And they say, who the hell are you? and then all of a sudden there is it's sort of a situation where they have to pay attention. Yeah. And by the same token, I also wonder if that has happened with him, where he's doing his experiments and then somebody comes and knocks on his door that's from perhaps they're from the future, perhaps they're from somewhere else. Who the hell knows? Yeah. So these things are sort of things he's not inclined to talk about. And of course, because it becomes highly personal. There's also friends of his have told me one of the reasons he doesn't share more with me is for my own protection, because when the more guarded what you're doing is, it's like this. If you walk down the street with $100 in your pocket, nobody really cares unless you're in a dangerous neighborhood. $1,000. But if you start wearing a money belt, okay, or are driving a armored car, and perhaps it's not too well armored, armored car robberies are much more common than people realize, particularly by the drivers of the armored car themselves. They'll take the money and run off somewhere, and believe it or not, they'll get away with it more than you'd think.
Yeah, especially nowadays.
Well, I'm talking about 20 years ago.
Yeah.
But it's like, yes. So the thing is, if you look at how, and I'm talking about money, if you walk away with something that's, or perhaps a weapon, you're going to get all of this scrutiny. Now, when you're controlling something like time, that could have, a quantum ripple effect on reality, there are other authorities besides your banking, police, and military authorities that go to another realm. And if you're starting to do this and the other thing, you're going to be put in your place real fast. and that's just the nature of world and security. Not everybody is meant to, go down into the basement of a building and sabotage the heating system or the plumbing system or whatever.
Right. Yeah. And another, even though again it's Hollywood and it's a movie, and I love Jean-Claude Van Damme movies, but Time Cop is kind of like where they would police those who went into time, and then it's like what you described. They had devices where they could tell who went where, and then they had to go back and apprehend them and make sure that they got either arrested or they were dealt with the responsibilities of what they did, and they brought them back or they did something to them. I don't remember. I got to rewatch the whole movie, but
I've never seen the movie, but that general idea
yeah,
is something that is, well, that's obviously dramatized.
yeah,
It's something one has to consider. It's like, are you somebody who's allowed to travel in time?
right,
And
right.
you're dealing more with a spiritual authority than a what's the word, temporal authority.
Yeah,
like an actual policeman.
right, exactly. So, but I know this is a absolutely very deep topic for my viewers and listeners. I know there's a lot of smart, intelligent people out there that probably understand a percentage of what we're talking about in tonight's topic about time travel and all the experiments of Montauk Project, the Philadelphia experiment, what's involved in time travel, all the theories and quantum physics. We've been talking about so much stuff. I'm having so much fun. I can't believe it's been an hour already. Peter, I want to make sure that you plug all your books and all your information before we part our ways on Strange Oddities podcast. But let our listeners know and viewers what books you recommend they read as far as your work, and where can they find your books?
Okay, the topic that we're discussing tonight, I would recommend The Silver Anniversary of the Montauk Project, Experiments in Time by Preston B. Nichols and myself, Peter Moon. You can get that on Kindle in ebook form. You can get it on Amazon. You can also get it from skybooks.usa.com. There are many other books that follow that topic and the general thread of my investigations, including Montauk Revisited, which is the occult investigation of Montauk, Pyramids of Montauk, because I found there were ancient pyramids there on the grounds where they did the time travel. And there are many other books you'll see at skybooks.usa.com. I would also recommend people go to the Time Travel Education Center.com, where I send out emails, usually when I'm appearing on a show like this or other shows. And there's also other videos you can see if you sign up as a paid subscriber, but you can sign up as a free member and see the 7 free videos. I have the only other thing I want to mention, I have a new book, The Roswell Deception and the Demystification of World War II, which will kind of turn your head around about the Roswell incident and what really happened there. I invite people to check that out. But that's
what you sent me a copy of, I believe. Yeah.
Okay. Yes.
Yep.
And there's also, I should also mention the Transylvania series, because David Anderson brought me to Romania, where I had occasion to visit Transylvania and do some very interesting research there. And there's a whole series of experiments and adventures that not are by me, but by a Romanian author, Radu Cinemar, Transylvanian Sunrise, which discusses my initial meeting with Dr. Anderson, my going to Romania, and a secret chamber that was found beneath the Romanian Sphinx. So that's that'll get people who are interested some legwork to do. And I thank you, Matt, for having me on your show. It was very nice to talk to you.
Yeah, absolutely. I seriously mean this from my heart. I would love to, because I know we're near each other. If we ever run into each other in like a coffee shop or have a drink somewhere, I'd love to sit down and have a chat with you in person and meet with you in person and like talk shop, because this stuff, this stuff blows my mind.
All right. Well, it's within the realm of possibility. We're not far apart.
Absolutely. So, guys, I hope everybody enjoyed the show tonight with author Peter Moon. Peter, if you don't mind just staying on with me for a little bit, we'll say our goodbyes after I end the show with our viewers and listeners. Is there anything else you'd like to add before before we end the show?
I pretty much for the topic we've covered tonight. I mean, I could do at least an hour on each book I've done or edited or published, and that's about 20 books. So, but for tonight, that's good. Thank you very much. I'll stay with you for a few minutes, whatever you need to do.
Yeah, absolutely. If you don't mind, I'll minimize you real quick here and gonna tell our listeners and viewers on what's coming up. So, Peter, thank you again for being on the show, Strange Oddities podcast. It's been a blast. My brain is now swelling, but it was a very educational on time travel, so I really enjoyed it. It was great. All right, so guys, that was Peter Moon, author Peter Moon. Again, I recommend his book. I have it here. It is The Molotov Project. You guys want to read more about the Philadelphia experiment? I recommend this book right here. I'll share it on the Facebook page as well. I will share Peter's information on the Facebook page of Strange Oddities Podcast. I hope you guys enjoyed tonight's show. I know I did. I had a lot of fun with Mr. Peter Moon. It's just a very intelligent man, and his books are amazing. I've been reading his books, big follower for many years, and I highly recommend going to his website. We'll put it on the Facebook page again. And so, guys, if you haven't subscribed, please subscribe to the show. We have lots of great guests. The only ways you're going to know what guests are coming up is go on the Strange Oddities Podcast Facebook page, give it a like. All the information is there. So that's it, guys. So I want to say goodnight to everybody and be well, be safe out there. And thank you for tuning in to Strange Oddities Podcast tonight. I'm going to play the video, and you guys have a great night. Here we go.